We reference the television series Smallville a lot around here, and there's one Smallville rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor as they discuss each and every episode of the series that ushered in the renaissance of superhero TV. Listen to Always Hold On to Smallville wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On to banner, including Arrow, DC's Legends of Tomorrow, Superman and Lois, and Star Wars. Fat Moose Comics is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Established in 1982 and under new ownership since 2020, Moose sells a wide selection of comics from every publisher and time period, along with action figures, graphic novels, posters, statues, and more. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you're in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. In 1986, Clark Kent's comic book history as Superboy was erased with the Man of Steel reboot for the post-crisis era. Then, in 2006, after another crisis, Clark's role as a costumed Boy of Steel was reinstated and explored over a little-remembered animated series and a quartet of comic book storylines from writer Jeff Johns. By 2011, the New 52 relaunch would erase Clark's Superboy once again, but for half a decade, Superboy was back. This is the Superboy Returns trilogy. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superboy fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss the Legion of Superheroes animated series is the host of Superman the Animated Podcast, returning guest, Nathan McKenzie. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. As we just discussed off mic, it's been a while since I've been on one of your podcasts, but it's grateful to see you again and to talk to you again and talk about something that not many people probably talk about. So yeah, this is very exciting.
This has really become a recurring theme here in our Superboy coverage. A lot of what we've talked about, I think, falls into the overlooked category, little remembered. And I think this animated series is in keeping with that. This aired on Kids WB from 2006 to 2008 for 2 seasons of 13 episodes apiece. And I had never watched it. I think I might have watched the first episode because I did own the DVDs at a certain point in time, and then I ultimately sold them, and then much more recently bought the complete series on Blu-ray. But at most, I watched the first episode, but it just wasn't something that I was really plugged into. I couldn't really tell you why. This came out when I was in college. I was working at my local comic shop. I was still following the comics. I was into all this stuff, so I don't really know exactly why, but it was just not something that I had ever fully explored. But I knew that this was the moment here now as we're in our Superboy coverage, because as we'll talk about, the series details a young Superman's adventures with the Legion of Superheroes in the 31st century. Not technically Superboy for legal reasons, more likely than anything else, but very much feels like the Superboy character. So this was the time to do it, and you were the guy to talk to about it. I've been promising you this episode literally for years at this point, but we made it. We finally made it.
Yeah, we did. I remember when we talked about it. I brought you on my podcast and we spoke about New Kids in Town of season 3 of the Superman animated series. And it's funny because I think I asked you the question about, are you a fan of the Legion? And I think at that time you weren't the biggest fan. And there's obviously people out there that love these characters and other people don't know much about them. But going back to this series, it's funny. Those who know me, I think I've spoken about it years ago. When I was in the army, I was actually deployed overseas at the time. I actually found this series by accident. Overseas, there's a lot of places where you can find, copies of DVDs, and I saw like this picture of the Superman logo on a DVD set, and I just so happened to grab it, and that's when I first watched it. So when I was deployed overseas in Afghanistan, and if it wasn't by that accident, I never would have known about this series. So, and I was so grateful to get the opportunity when you asked to watch the series again. And it's and I'm looking forward to talking about it as well. So this is a lot of fun.
What was that experience like to be in that situation in particular and have something like this as a bit of a breather, I guess, from what's going on around you? Like, what was that experience like as you were watching this for the first time?
I think obviously we're overseas to do a job, but the best thing about having something like this, and Superman to me is just like he says in the movies, he's all about hope, and the best thing about watching something like this, take your mind off what you're actually doing. It also gives you that uplift as well, to know that you're doing a good job, you're here for a reason, and the good things that you do is going to inspire those around you. And that's what watching not only this series, but obviously anything with Superman in it. Smallville was another thing that I watched overseas, and also found years ago was, Lois and Clark. I found that as well. So just watching Superman obviously can take your mind off what's happening in real life, knowing what he stands for can build you up, but also you can wake up the next day and go, I can make the world better around me if I just inspire what I'm seeing in front of me.
No, that's amazing. So obviously you have this history with this animated series, whereas I, like I said, did not until I binged all 26 episodes over the past few nights. Let me say this right at the top. I had a great time with this series. What a gem of a series. I really had a great time with it. I'm excited to compare notes. I guess the last sort of preliminary question I have, you mentioned the Legion. And like you said, when you first invited me on your show, it was to talk about the New Kids in Town episode of Superman, the animated series. So I'm sure we've already had this discussion, but to refresh my memory and for anyone listening to us for the first time, what is your history and experience with the Legion of Superheroes specifically, separate from the animated show?
I think we spoke about in the past, like before, probably about 15 years ago, I hadn't read many comic books, so I didn't really know much about the Legion until I found that series. So that was actually my first introduction to the Legion of Superheroes, who they were, what they were. And I think it was great because when I got to see, I saw Superman the animated series, obviously previous to this, and you got a snippet of that, but to know the full extent of what they were and how they were. And then, with Smallville, they rocked up on Smallville. And then the Arrowverse, we saw snippets of the Legion as well. And just know they were a greater, it was hard initially because in some storylines, Supergirl goes to the future and it's not Superman. So this is, I like the storytelling of this. When I watched this series, it was interesting having a look at what they're going to do for this series, which I guess we'll talk about as well. But it's a series like I said, really enjoyed for what it was, and it was a lot of fun. Going back from the original, obviously Superman, who we know and love today.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, like I said, this was the first time I watched it, and it kind of comes at an interesting point here in our ongoing Superboy coverage. So previously, we looked at the character's pre-crisis history across media. And then, of course, we had a number of episodes on the live-action Superboy television series, which aired in the late 80s and early 90s post-crisis on Infinite Earth. So ironically, the character was no longer in existence in the comic books, Clark as Superboy, but was having these adventures on television. But that show ends in 92. And for the next 14 years, we have the character who would come to be known as Connor Kent bearing the mantle of Superboy beautifully, admirably. Still, when I think of Superboy, even after all of this, he's still first in my heart.
Yep.
But then we enter what I think is a particularly fascinating half a decade stretch from 2006 to 2011, from the end of Infinite Crisis to the start of the New 52 relaunch from DC. Because during that 5-year period, you have Clark Kent's history as Superboy and his adventures in the 31st century with the Legion reinstated. And the extent to which that's fully explored, I think, is fairly limited when you look at the grand scheme of things. Primarily, it takes the form of a quartet of comic book stories written by Jeff Johns. The Lightning Saga, Superman and the Legion of Superheroes, Final Crisis, Legion of Three Worlds, and Secret Origin. And there's also an arc of adventure comics written by Paul Levitz. And that's the comic book side. And we're going to be talking about all of that over our next 2 episodes. And then we also have this 2-season animated series. So again, I think it all hits at a particularly interesting moment of time before Clark as Superboy is once again erased from continuity as we head into the New 52. Now, I know you said you're not particularly well-versed in the comic book side, though I know your comic book reading has grown, but as I'm laying all of that out, is that tracking at all? You're like, what the hell is he talking about?
A lot of it is a bit over my head a little bit, I must admit. But the whole, it's funny. I actually grew up with the Superboy TV show here in Australia. Coming home after school, 4 o'clock, I was in front of the TV. I can't remember every episode, and I can't wait to go back and do a rewatch. And I think you're excited about doing, what you've done previously as well, and hearing other people talking about it after listening to your podcast. I've seen things on social media going, it's got me excited again to go back to Superboy. And like I said, for me, Superboy was Clark Kent as a young boy. And then lately now, the new incarnation of obviously Connor Kent. And the first time I saw that was on Smallville. And then I'm just doing a rewatch now of Titans as well. I'm watching Connor on that series as well. So, and have an understand. And I think, as you mentioned before, I find that character as Superboy probably better than a younger. I've always never liked the idea of Superboy being a younger Clark Kent. I just like the fact that he's Superman. So, but I do understand the reason why they've gone down this Connor Kent line, and I do like the character very much so. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, a lot of those comic books you're talking, I've heard of them, but I haven't actually read them. But I understand exactly what you're saying.
Gotcha. And yeah, for our audience, those stories that I just listed, that's what we'll be talking about over our next couple of episodes. So we'll really be delving once again into the comic book side of Clark as Superboy, particularly during this time. But this Legion of Superheroes animated series, again, 2 seasons, 13 episodes apiece. And in the first season, like I said, we have a very young Superman. In the initial press release for this, he was actually described as Superboy. So we are aware of ongoing legal battles. And my understanding is that's what ultimately accounted for them calling him Superman instead of Superboy. But when you look at the character in that first season in particular, because then we'll have a time jump in the second season and we'll have sort of a different flavor of the character. But in that first season, he really is Superboy in terms of where he is in his physical and personal development. We catch up with him in the series premiere. It's his last night in Smallville. He's about to leave for a job as a copy boy at the Daily Planet in Metropolis. Clearly, he's been performing saves. We see him first in the bathroom reading a newspaper, and there's a headline about a bus mysteriously saved. So he's been performing saves, but he still has not fully mastered his powers. He hasn't yet flown. Later in the episode, he'll learn how to use super breath for the first time. Lightning Lad will be like, think cold and blow. And perhaps most notably, particularly in the context of these discussions that we're having, he's not a costumed, public-facing superhero yet. And he is on the scrawnier side. He's got the sweater vest. He's got the glasses. What's interesting here is that this show comes, once again, when we talk about the context of all of this show comes about right smack in the middle of Smallville's decade-long run. And when you look at the Clark of the Smallville television series versus the Clark here, very different. I mean, this Clark Kent feels very much like the Clark of the pre-crisis comics, not the post-crisis and Smallville version where he's much more physically developed and capable. Even on Smallville, yes, there's some awkwardness there initially, but by the time we get to season 4, he's captain of the football team. So again, the Clark we catch up with in the beginning is very much that very meek and mild-mannered. And even as he's going out to the fair, Martha is quick to remind him, you're not like the other boys. And he's at the fair and he wants to throw the ball at the bottles, right, and win the prize, but he doesn't want to risk drawing attention to himself, so he purposely misses. And not to be a jerk and nitpick here, but I'm saying to myself, would it have been the worst thing in the world for him to win a prize? If anything, I feel like he called more attention to himself by missing.
That's 100% correct. And it just goes back to that, almost the Christopher Reeve movies when, Clark Kent and Superman were just the way he portrayed that character. And a lot of people have got their thought process on that. Like you go back to The Adventures of Superman with how George Reeve portrayed Clark. He was just, he stood up. He never actually, hunched over or anything like that. But so they kind of portrayed him in that light in this first episode, which, yeah, like I said, you could just hear his mum, hear Mark Kent in the background saying, you're not like the other kids and all that sort of stuff. And I just love the fact that when they finally make it to the 31st century and when he walks into the Superman museum and he finds the suit, And he puts the suit on and it absolutely swims on him. So it just goes to show what you said before, Anthony, with regard to the fact that he was still scrawny. He was not built like the Superman we know and love. But yeah, it was definitely a good start to the series.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that first episode, and not that we'll go episode by episode because there's 26 of them, but the first episode, certainly a particularly critical one, obviously. But in that first episode, you have a trio from the Legion. We have Brainiac 5, Saturn Girl, and Bouncing Boy. So not the classic trio who comes back to the past that we've seen in the comics, but a key trio who comes to this night in Smallville to recruit Clark to bring him to the future because the Legion needs help fighting the Fatal Five. And Clark is understandably reluctant initially, but is enticed by this idea of learning more about his powers and getting to see the future. And particularly, they mention how they'll be able to bring him back at the exact moment that he left. So he's not going to, quote unquote, miss anything. And so he's on board with this idea. And like you said, he goes there. And not too long after that initial meeting with the rest of the Legion, he does encounter the Superman Museum and sees this giant statue of his future self and the costume and the glass. He's met with skepticism. Well, he's met with a mix of reactions, I guess, from the other Legionnaires. From Lightning Lad in particular, a fair degree of skepticism. And Lightning Lad even has a remark about, like, oh, some ancient hero from the past, which, having now watched the entire thing, and also knowing what we know about the Legion generally, did that totally track for you? Lightning Lad's reaction to him?
No, it didn't really, because I would have thought that they would have seen this powerful, they've seen this statue. They know what Superman was. And, and also they talk about the inspiration to the Legion was obviously Superman as well. But as we learn later on in season 2, actually who formed the Legion and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it wasn't really tracking. But also, I think at the start they were trying to portray Lightning Lad as cocky and a bit above himself.
Yeah, and it totally works in that sense. But like one of the things that struck me about particularly the first season of Legion of Superheroes was that, yes, the Superman Museum is there. And I guess that tells us a good amount, but they're not, I mean, unless I'm forgetting something and remind me, but they're really not explicit about the idea that Superman and his legend inspired the Legion of Superheroes. It's not really said. Again, you see the museum. I feel like it's not until season 2 when there's an episode with Chameleon Boy long story short, Chameleon Boy has gone undercover and is shapeshifted. There's all this business, but essentially they're reliving memories. And there's this conversation between Superman and Chameleon Boy where he talks about him being the inspiration. So it's like, okay. And then in one of the final episodes of season 2, we get that flashback to Cosmic Boy, Lightning Lad, and Saturn Girl saving the life of R.J. Brand and then forming this Legion and them having their own moment of going to the Superman Museum and being inspired. So all that to say, I don't know how much what we see in that first episode, what we know about Legion lore generally, and what we see in that flashback. I don't know if it all totally lines up, Lightning Lad's reaction in particular, but it's fine. We can go with it. It creates a little bit of conflict and tension. You need that.
Yeah. No, exactly. And basically the first season's almost surrounded by those main three is, Bouncing Boy, Saturn Girl, and Lightning Lad. And I like the fact that it's almost like a lot of the series they do nowadays. They try to pick one character and, basically it'd be an episode of that character, for this episode and then move on to somebody else. But, and then obviously brought more characters in who, had more of a showpiece on them moving forward, which is really good. But like you said, I think they did that for a reason. They did that for that, just to show what this character was and showcasing how Lightning Lad, how cool he thinks he is, which I think is pretty cool. But also we learn who he is moving forward as well, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, so kind of on that note, we do follow primarily a core group of Legionnaires. So Lightning Lad, Saturn Girl, Brainiac 5, Phantom Girl, Bouncing Boy, Triplicate Girl, Timberwolf, and then Chameleon Boy as we make our way into season 2. Yeah. There are other Legionnaires who are present. Some of them are just kind of in the background and they're more Easter egg appearances. Others get, like you were saying, a 1-episode spotlight. Dream Girl gets an episode. Karate Kid gets an episode. Ferro Lad has a critical trio of appearances towards the end of the first season, culminating in an adaptation of that original Death of Ferro Lad storyline from the comics with the Sun Eater. And Cosmic Boy pops up towards the end of season 1. There's a bit of a struggle for leadership of the team between him and Lightning Lad. And then he has a little bit more of a presence in season 2. But all that to say that a couple of things just sang for me about this series. One was that I think they struck a nice balance between living up to the name Legion, where again, a lot of the Legionnaires are represented in some way, shape, or form over the course of these 26 episodes. But episode to episode, you're not inundated with this flood of characters. They do focus on a relatively core group here with those occasional spotlights. And I feel like that allows you to kind of sink your teeth into individual characters and dynamics. And especially in the first season, I feel they didn't lose sight of Superman. And I don't mean to harp on this, but when I read the Bronze Age Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes comics and we talked about them, that was the struggle that I had with those issues. It just felt like Superman was one of many. And I felt like I couldn't really follow the thread of that particular character. Whereas here, in season 1 in particular, and I want to get your take on this as well, but I felt like they did a really good job of, no, he's not the leader of the team, but he occupies a place of prominence. And it's not that he's driving all of these stories or all of these stories revolve around him. But when you look at those 13 season 1 episodes, I would say the vast majority, there's something that he learns about himself or some sort of personal development that he undergoes in almost all of those episodes. And when we compare the two seasons, like season 1, again, I would say is far more episodic. We don't have a season-long arc per se. But like I said, you do get those moments of discovery and development for Superboy in virtually all of those episodes. And then we do get a shift in season 2 with a time jump. And then we do have a big bad Imperiex, a lot more to say on that front. But then we have that season-long big bad and arc and whatnot. But that was kind of what I found. So I felt like they were able to strike a nice balance. I mean, how did you feel?
Yeah, and also the fact that the logo Legion of Superheroes comes up with a big Superman symbol on it as well, so it kind of showcases that yes, this is what the series is called, but it's mainly about Superman. So, and I think, like I said, that's what led me to wanting to watch the series when I found it. Is that I found a copy of the DVD with the Superman logo on it. If it just would have said Legion of Superheroes, I probably would have missed it. But you are right, and the fact that he was in every single episode of season 1, if I'm not mistaken, and he had an arc with almost every character as well. Like even like a simple one, I think it was Champions, when he went to Lightning Lad had his competition, almost like like a mini Olympics, and he was fighting up against his brother, and he was with Phantom Girl, and obviously the interaction between him and Brainiac, which goes all the way to the season series 2 finale, just the love for each other, the camaraderie with each other, that to not give up on each other, which is fantastic. And and it was showcased really well. I thought the fact that they showed growing up as a character, not fully understanding his powers, and like you said in the first episode when Lightning Lad said think cold, just little things like that, and they're helping each other along. And it also showed the value of teamwork, which I think could also land. And Superman spoke about he didn't mention Batman by name, but he mentioned in season 2, I knew someone like you back on my planet that is a loner and all that sort of stuff. So I think it builds that teamship and teamwork, and that's what this series did.
100%. This also kind of solved a little something for me. I think something that I've been wrestling with over the course of talking about Clark as Superboy. As I've been saying, my perspective on this has really expanded a lot, and I'm a lot more open now to different ways of accounting for how Clark learns to become Superman. We'll phrase it generally like that. And this is a question we're gonna circle back to not too long from now.
Yep.
But I think that one of the things that was a little tough, again, going back to those Bronze Age stories, but even Silver Age as well, the notion of Clark being fully powered, fully active, fully known as Superboy in present day, and also routinely having all of these adventures with the Legion. Like every week, he's just running off to the future. I know there's a charm and an appeal to those stories, and people grew up with them, and there's love for that, and that's fine. But I guess, like I said, what worked for me here was kind of this notion that his time in the future essentially functions like college, like Superman college for him, where he's graduated high school, he's about to go to Metropolis, and he has this chapter, this adventure with them for a discrete period of time. I mean, at the end of the pilot, obviously he decides to stay there, And he stays for the duration of the first season. And then he returns to his time. It's not like he's going back and forth and getting his mind wiped and all of that. There is one little mind wipe in season 2, which we can talk about. But generally, it's not that what we saw in the pre-crisis comics. And I kind of just, that really grabbed me. This notion of, like I said, a specific adventure for a discrete period of time and for that purpose of learning how to use his powers in an environment where he can be totally free. And I know aspects of that, yes, are present in those comics that I'm complaining about now. Just the idea of him being able to be around others like him and to not have to hide. I get that. But here, again, it's just, I find it interesting that it's this version of Clark who has never flown and is really hiding behind the glasses. And even when he meets those Legionnaires in that first episode, he's like, please don't tell anyone about me. Like, that's the point in the journey where we find him. And then you see what this time in the future just unlocks and opens up for him. And people might be listening to this and be like, yeah, no, that's what the comics were always like. But I didn't really see that the way that I saw it here. So this just worked for me.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that got me when I first started going into the research about this series was it a part of the DCAU? And we found that it pretty much wasn't. Like I would have loved. So that episode you and I spoke about, New Kids in Town. Like I would have loved the fact that they did a snippet in that episode where Clark goes to the future and comes back, and we know nothing about it. And this series was basically based on that time that he left. I would have loved for that been that gap. And also the fact in season 2, which we'll talk about later, a character comes back in this series, reprised by the same voice actor who did it in Superman the Animated Series in the DCAU, which I thought was great. But because this show's not really associated with that, it was like, okay, I love it because I love that voice actor and what he brings to that character. But yeah, anyway. But yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying. The fact that I think you worded it perfectly. It's like going to college. This is him basically. He's doing his course. He's doing his studies. He's learning how to become this. Like you go back to Superman the movie. He was gone for 12 years to learn how to be Superman, and that's basically what he's done. He's gone to the 31st century to learn his craft. One thing, they try to talk to him every now and again, about his secret identity and all that sort of stuff. Whereas he didn't have to hide his secret identity. He didn't have to hide who he was. No one actually come out and said, like in the museum, was Superman Clark Kent, or anything like that. And I love the fact that the museum's got like almost comic book, pictures on the. I love the fact that they had that around the museum. I thought that was pretty cool. But no, I do like to answer your question, I do love the fact that went to this series and just made it its own thing. He's gone to because when he went back to, his point in time that he left, we never actually saw what he did. We never actually, got to see what his take was. So the start of season 2, I would have loved to have seen a snippet in Metropolis. He was doing something, but we never got to see that. So it was all obviously a thought process of what we think was happening.
Yeah, I do have some complaints about season 2 and Superman's presence in that. I'll get to, but no, you bring up an interesting point, and I wanted to talk about this kind of the origin of the series because so one of the key producers was James Tucker, who worked on Justice League and Unlimited and a bunch of other DC animated properties. But there is an interview where he addressed exactly what you were bringing up, like whether or not this was meant to be officially connected with the DCAU, and he debunked that. He said no, that wasn't the case, and essentially what he laid out was that Cartoon Network wanted a Superman-centric animated series to coincide with the release of Superman Returns. And so they developed this, but Cartoon Network passed, and then Kids WB stepped in because they were looking for something similar. And so that's how it ended up on Kids WB. But what I would say, and this is, I particularly wanted to ask you, given all the time you spent looking at Superman the Animated Series and these shows generally, to me, it definitely feels in keeping with the DCAU. And I say that as a compliment, as someone who loves the DCAU. At the same time, it has its own flavor. I mean, my goodness, that opening music, the theme, right? The funky jazz number, it definitely has its own feel. And it's not like the designs are a carbon copy of what we saw in the Bruce Timm verse. It is its own thing and it has its own flavor. But I would say that in terms of aspects of the design and just the storytelling, the tone, the characterization, the level of sophistication that I think it tells these stories with, to me, felt like akin to to the DCAU shows. Did you have a similar feeling?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I would have loved to have been a part of that series, but I totally understand why that, and as you just spoke about with regards to what it was brought in to do. But I do love the fact that it was its own entity as such. And like I said, the character designs, the animation style, it changed a little bit from season 1 to season 2. Season 1, you would think, is more of a kids, very like younger kids, and season 2 actually got darker in some respects. So I love the fact that, it skipped forward a few years. They never actually mentioned how long it was, but we obviously changed all the differences and changes of character. Even Brainiac got older, obviously got upgraded with Lightning Lad. Some of the other characters remain the same, but yeah, there was no spoken about the differences in timeframes and that sort of things. But yeah, it was just one of those things that, I enjoyed the bit, but like I said, I still wish it was part of that DCAU. Just the fact I love it so much, and it would have just filled a gap where we never would have had before. So, but I still enjoyed it for what it was.
No, honestly, man, like I hear you, and I wouldn't be opposed to that, because it is one of those things. Now you really got me thinking about this, because I read that interview and it's like, okay, no, it wasn't meant to be connected. But then you think about, well, could it have been? And in fairness, like you and I, of course, have talked about, there was that New Kids in Town episode. So there was this encounter with the Legion. Clark's mind is wiped. And then, of course, in Justice League Unlimited towards the end, we have Supergirl going off to the future with the Legion. But so they didn't have much of a presence across all of those episodes of the DCAU show. So that gives some freedom there. It's not like there's much that they would have to line up with. And even when we look at Clark's journey, going back to those first few episodes of Superman the Animated Series, there is a gap there. And we're never fully told exactly how he's spending all of that time, or certainly don't see it. So who's to say that there wasn't something like this? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, something like that could have been interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm cool with this being totally its own thing. Yeah. But I do agree with you. There is a version. And you also kind of wonder, would that have changed the equation in terms of people finding the show, in terms of the show's longevity, in terms of the show being remembered, if it had been a part? I mean, I don't know. It might be totally the same or not. So I guess that cuts both ways. We'll never know.
No, exactly. And I think what you just said was perfect. If this was part of that incarnation of DCAU, I think people would have found it faster, and they probably would have, but then they would have jumped on the bandwagon of, do they like it, do they not? These are, like if you even go into that episode we just discussed, Chameleon Boy is a totally different redesign. Cosmic Boy and Saturn Girl are pretty much the same in some respects, but yeah, I think the fact that we know its own identity now, and the fact that you and I are talking about it today, and other people out there who have watched the series, hopefully they can watch it too and actually love it for what it was. And like I said, the animation style still holds up today, and I thought it was perfect. So yeah, it was well done.
Yeah, it watched great. I mean, like I said, I really had a good time with this, and just for my own busyness and procrastination, a little bit of both. I ended up binging more of this than I originally intended to, which is always the case with all this stuff. But it worked. It wasn't one of those things where I was like, oh man, I got to watch another one of these. It's like, no, I was happy to watch it. It really held my interest. It was engaging. You were hitting on this before. I want to circle back to kind of what Superman is going through in these episodes, especially in season 1, what he's learning. So in that first episode where he sees the museum, he sees the statue, and then another episode a little bit later with Alexis, the richest girl in the galaxy, who he saves, and she takes an interest in him. And she's got red hair, and she starts to get jealous when Superman, pardon me, I might do that because really this was Superboy here, is prioritizing, understandably, his responsibilities to the Legion over socializing with her. And that sets her off, and she ends up aligning with the villains of that episode. And then Superman and the Legion have to stop her, and she is temporarily balded. And later at the end of the episode, we see her last name written in interlac on her prison jumpsuit. And what is it but?
Yeah, Lex.
Yeah, Luthor.
Luthor, yeah. It's funny. It didn't actually hit me until the end of the episode. I'm going, I can't even believe I did not pick that up at the start, even with her name.
What I will say, in fairness to you, I am the first thing that came to my mind, like a young woman with red hair who has an interest in him. I'm thinking Lana. Like I'm just instantly going to Lana. So it took me a minute as well. But well, two things. One, I'm shocked they never did more with her. There's an episode later on where they're on that prison planet and he sees her, but that's it. I really thought she was going to come back and we were going to get more. That felt like maybe that would have been a season 3 thing. I don't know, but that felt like we left a little something on the table. But more importantly, what they bond over is something that I think is so central to, if you're going to tell a Superboy story, what is there to mine? And one of the things is exactly this, what they bond over, the specter of what they're meant to be. Right? What awaits them in the future, who they're supposed to be when they grow up, who they're supposed to grow into. And that's sort of what they bond over. And for Superboy, this kind of represents an opportunity to kind of, unplug, I guess, from everything that's been going on for him. And so there is something very appealing. And what I loved about this episode is that Brainiac is trying to get them to patrol, but he's sending out all these alerts, and a lot of them end up being kind of meaningless ultimately. And so Superboy ends up ignoring the one that proves to be critical. And Superboy's not there when he really needs to be. And Brainiac gets injured. And of course, he's ultimately okay. But that's a mistake that young Superman makes that I don't think adult Superman would make. And that's what I liked about this. Because it's like, all right, if you're going to tell this story, like that's a story that you can tell that's, I think, distinct to this particular version of the character or the character at this particular juncture in his journey. And he has a takeaway from that about this responsibility. I thought it was great.
And it's, they never actually said what age he was when we first see him in the first episode, but we can pretty much tell he's either a late teenager. Yeah. Because he's just going, he's early 20s or whatever, but he's still young. Like you said, he wants to have fun. He wants to make friends. He wants to enjoy himself. And to be honest, Brainy was getting on everyone's nerve in that episode. So everyone was getting, sometimes too much information is too much. But as you said, like the fact that we at the end of the episode, we see Luthor and we understand this character and we think, okay, we're going to see more of her moving forward. And, moving on to basically the very next episode, we talk about, one of the Phantoms, Drax. It's exactly the same thing. I still want to know where he's come from and why do we not see more of him, or just things like that.
Yeah, that was very intriguing. So I'm going to keep calling him Superboy because he's Superboy. He finds the look for someone who's I've been so opposed to the idea of Clark as Superboy, and now I'm like, oh, he's Superboy. But he's in the museum and he finds the Phantom Zone projector, which looked very much like the design from Superman the Animated Series.
Yeah, it was just different colors. Like the one in the series is white. I love the fact that that's what I'm saying, that there's little snippets that you see that brings you back. But
yeah. I mean, I think that's one of those things. I mean, we could chalk it up to you have people who worked on shows, from that iteration. But just generally speaking, when certain design elements become part of the visual language of the character, and then you see that echoed. I mean, that's cool. I like stuff like that. But this is another instance where, just like he shirked his responsibility in the Alexis Luthor episode, here too, it's like, he makes a mistake. He activates this Phantom Zone projector and releases this character Drax, who has the Zod symbol on his crest, and also has these alien pet monsters, Comet and Cupid. And this was intriguing because you only get kind of hints about what this guy's deal is. I mean, he talks about being, I don't know, either bred or created in the Phantom Zone.
Yeah.
So it kind of shades of the Chris Kent character who came from the Phantom Zone in the Jeff Johns Last Son storyline from like right around here in the comic. So that's one of the other things, and maybe we'll pick this up when we talk about the comics in the next couple of episodes. Given how far in advance animation works, like I can't imagine that there was necessarily coordination or synergy in a literal sense, but it's just kind of interesting how some of these things lined up like that, just kind of those ideas.
No, exactly. And, I know in the past, and I don't know if you might have spoke about it when you're doing some of your episodes of Superboy, some of the, the comic book creators were actually, part of that series. They actually were the producers or the directors of those episodes and the writers as well. So, So there could have been interaction between the two. I'm not sure. But like I said, I do love the fact that, and you pointed out just before, that some of the, the creators, or, they worked on the original series, or, Superman, the animated series, popped over to this and thought, if people see that, they know exactly what it is. And that's why we've done it that way and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, like I said, you're going back to, when Superman got married and we saw him in the comic books, and then we saw her, in Lois and Clark as well. So there's little bits and pieces there. So I think you could be onto something there.
Yeah, but all that to say that in that Jeff Johns' Last Son storyline that he co-wrote with Richard Donner, you have the son of Zod and Ursa escaping the Phantom Zone along with the rest of them. They kind of send him as their advance agent. But anyway, he has this horrific upbringing that is alluded to in a very abusive upbringing in the zone with the parents and all of that. Again, you don't get that level of backstory here, but just it kind of had shades of that. Like he was created in the zone and is sent out to attack. And then there's also this interesting bit of business where Brainiac has kryptonite. And Drax kind of calls him out on that essentially he's keeping this failsafe against young Superman that Superman doesn't know about. That's never directly followed up on, but it was an interesting idea to at least pose.
And I think, and you see a lot of it during season 1 and season 2, that Brainiac is trying to keep a lot of, I wouldn't say secrets. He's wanting Superman to find this out for himself. I think kryptonite actually probably would have been a good thing to tell Clark, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, kind of along those lines, other things that he learns in these episodes, when Brainiac malfunctions during that alignment process that he goes through, Superman and Timberwolf take him to the planet Zune to get this element that will restore him. And that's where Superman learns that his powers require a yellow sun. Right. And then there's another episode where he learns that he's vulnerable to magic when they're attacked by Zix, who looks and behaves and operates just like Mxyzptlk. I really thought we were going to be in fifth dimensional territory, but then it turns out he's from a planet populated by a race of these impish magicians. So that went in a direction that I wasn't expecting. But there too, it's like, I'm vulnerable to magic. So, he's getting these pieces along the way. And in almost all of these episodes, there's kind of something that he's gleaning about himself, either in terms of his powers or that personal development.
Yeah, and it was good to see, and it's almost like going back to Smallville, how we watch him grow as a character, but also learn his powers, and, and going through My Adventures with Superman, the same thing, the fact that almost every episode he's learning a new power, how to use it, how to develop it, what it means, and also learning how strong he really is. We saw snippets of it in this series of, how strong he is and how strong he's yet to be, so... Yeah, I love the fact that they did that, and they showed it in this series how they did it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, I think the character who gets the most spotlight is young Superman, rightfully so, as we're here as Superman podcasters. But as far as the other characters, other threads that kind of continue, especially over the course of that first season, Lightning Lad, and this goes into the second season as well, but Lightning Lad and his relationship with his brother Mech. That's definitely a running thread throughout a lot of these. A couple episodes dealing with Phantom Girl and her strained relationship with her mother, who's the president. And a very humorous moment when, and I think you were mentioning this before, when Superman meets her at the Olympics, and he's, so flustered and out of sorts, and Phantom Girl is teasing him about it. Little moments like that were great. Bouncing Boy, who I thought was a great choice to really kind of spotlight in this show, because I thought... Yeah. In terms of just the design and the vocal performance, he really just popped and brought a fun flavor, but also had the weight, no pun intended, when the time came. And especially as you get to those later episodes, the one where the Lightning Lad's home planet is being ravaged by these storms. And Bouncing Boy is the one who's like, hey, I can see the big picture that you guys can't. We can predict where these storms are coming. We don't have to just be, playing catch up all the time. We can get proactive. And others are kind of slow to really heed his warning, but he ultimately, with Triplicate Girl's encouragement, stands up for himself and asserts himself. And when we get to the end of the season, like I was mentioning before, you have Cosmic Boy and Lightning Lad, jockeying for position, but when they vote, it's ultimately Bouncing Boy who gets the job. So like, I thought that was great. I like him kind of having that place of prominence on the team.
Well, funnily enough, he was actually my favorite character in season 1. Like, I am a Superman fan, and I love Superman, and I'll always love him. But I think Bouncing Boy was my favorite character in that whole first season, just for what he brought to the team. And like you said, at the very end, with the jostling of positions for leadership, and Bouncing Boy was just basically just portrayed that. Just listen to me. And like you said, Triplicate Girl, just showed faith in him, which I love. And then also the start of season 2, you see that relationship there growing, even though I feel for Triplicate Girl, which we'll get to. But it was just disappointing in season 2 where we didn't see much of Bouncy Boy, but also towards the end we find out he's no longer the leader anymore. I thought, what happened there? But that's something else we can talk about. But yeah, I loved Bouncy Boy in season 1, and I thought it was like the glue that held everyone together.
No, I agree. And along those lines, I was surprised that the show tread so lightly as it did with respect to romantic pairings. So as you watch it, even if you don't have the history from the comics, I think you can see that there's something between Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl, especially when probably in both seasons, but especially in the second season when she's injured and she's sidelined and she's in her healing trance for a bunch of episodes and he's keeping watch over her. And certainly with Triplicate Girl and Bouncing Boy, first in season 1, how she encourages him, like we just talked about. And then when we get into season 2, when one of her selves is lost, don't worry, not forever. She comes back at the very end. And Triplicate Girl becomes Duo Damsel, but Bouncing Boy is there to comfort her. In the comics, Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl married, and ditto, I believe, for Bouncing Boy and Triplicate Girl. Okay. As you watch these, it's like you get the sense that something's there, but I would have expected not full-blown romances, but I would have expected a little bit more. I mean, especially given what we had seen on the Justice League shows. The flirtation between Batman and Wonder Woman, the relationship between Jon Stewart and Hawkgirl. It's like these shows were capable of this stuff. I was surprised that they like really didn't go there.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't. Like you said, they had total opportunity to do it in Superman animated series with obviously, Lois and Clark. Didn't do it. We saw it obviously later on in Justice League, but as you just pointed out perfectly with Batman, Wonder Woman, with Green Lantern and Hawkgirl, they show that it can be done and done successfully and done well if done right. And there were snippets of it through this series, which I think, like I said, deep down we all knew. And you could see, but obviously between Cosmic Boy and Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl, the fact that there was, I always thought there might have been a tension between those two because of her, not necessarily because of the leadership side of things. So from an outsider, that's what my thoughts process was going down.
Yeah. I mean, I think something like that could have totally worked. We're going back just to button up. We're talking about what Superboy learns. There's also that Fear Factory episode when they're taken on that ship and in prison, and the villain uses their fears against them. And ultimately Brainiac has Superman kind of like plug Brainiac into the system to kind of shut everything down, which would result in Brainiac's destruction. And Superman's fear is sort of being able to make that choice. And he ultimately does. Like, he makes that, he essentially assists Brainiac in making that sacrifice. Of course, Brainiac has a backup of himself, but he purposely didn't tell Superman about that because he wanted to know that Superman would be able to take that step. So again, I just wanted to mention that because I feel like that's another key piece in this ongoing journey that he's on. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates and promotes everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations: Harrison, New York, aka my local comic shop, Skokie, Illinois, or Muncie, Indiana. If you have kids and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow Aw Yeah on social media for more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. Creator and podcaster Perry Constantine, host of Superhero Cinephiles, has a special offer for listeners of this podcast. Visit percivalconstantine.com/DFK or click the link in the show notes. Fill out the form and then get 2 free novels and 1 free superhero short story. The novels are Vanguard, Heroes Forged, an Avengers-inspired team of superheroes, and Ronin Born, a cyberpunk superhero novel set in a futuristic, fascist Japan. The short story is Omega Knights, Fire and Lightning, a Power Rangers-inspired prequel to an upcoming serial. Take advantage of this offer today, and be sure to catch Superhero Cinephiles on all major podcast platforms. Filmmakers and movie fans alike should be sure to attend these film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and Round Reel in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Take it from an alum of 2 of them. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news about events, discounts, tickets, and more. Also, listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts, available via a shared universe network.
Brainiac 5 was basically with him like side by side throughout the whole series, which I thought was fantastic as well, like you said, in his development. And even I think I remember it was at you look at the start of season 2, which we'll talk about very soon, the fact that the first episode's basically he's doing holograms of him working with Superman. It's just the love for the characters and, you know, for each other, and that is fantastic. And but just the fact is, yeah, just like you said, Superman's development throughout the whole series, and that one, Fear itself with him is you know, was that. And if just another stepping stone of what makes Superman Superman.
And then you get to the 2-part finale, Sundown, where just like the comics, you have the Legion forming this very tentative alliance with the Fatal Five to stop this Sun Eater from consuming their sun. Yeah. The added wrinkle here, and of course, in keeping with the comics, Feral Lad, a very new recruit to the team, sacrifices himself in the end. But the added wrinkle here is that you have this business about one of the controllers being the one who freed the Sun Eater, because whereas the rest of the controllers craved order, this controller has broken from that and craves chaos.
Chaos. Yeah.
And this really gave young Superman something to do in this finale, because the rest were dealing with the Sun Eater, but he went after the controller. And when he sees Feral Lad make that sacrifice, the anger, the rage that he displays towards the controller, he doesn't kill him. But there's a moment there where it seems like he might, and essentially, I think the controller opens up his own portal right back to his world or whatnot. But Superboy really like shoves him through, and it's like, don't you ever come back. But just to see kind of how far he could potentially go, but ultimately making the choice not to. Again, just critical. Like, I really thought that was effective.
Yeah, and we've seen that in a lot of different incarnations of Superman, especially in animation. You know, you go back to Apocalypse Now in Superman animated series, the anger he shows after Dan Turpin dies. You go back to Superman versus the Elite, when everyone, you know, they're getting sick and tired of all these villains going back to prison and escaping and killing people, and they want Superman basically to do something about it. They want them to basically kill these villains, but he shows in the end what that actually does to everybody. If he's shown the dark side of what he can be, we won't go down the injustice line, all that sort of stuff. But he's just shown that if he just stays true and good to himself, and the showcases for all the people around you, that, you know, what this symbolizes and what this represents. So, but yeah, it definitely, again, it was well done how they brought Superman up from episode 1 to episode 13 in that first season.
Yeah, and it felt organic. I mean, I know we're kind of talking about it. We're laying out, okay, he learns this in this episode and that in that episode, but I don't feel like that's how it plays, right? I mean, that's kind of how we're recounting it, but it feels organic in these episodes, to the credit of the show. I will say, with the Feral Lad business, in fairness, I don't think it's really dissimilar from the comic. I mean, when I did my reading, we read the 2-parter where the Feral Lad sacrifices himself, not the lead up to it. But my understanding is, he wasn't part of the team in the comics for that long leading up to his death. So here too, he shows up in the, I think the 3rd to last episode of the season. And then we have the 2-parter. It would have been cool if we had more time with the character to get to know him and to identify with him more. And I feel like maybe the loss then would have been a little bit more powerful. But then I argue against myself. This is still ultimately a kid's show. So maybe that's part of the reason why. Like, maybe that would have been too upsetting. But then I go back, no, but I'm going to argue against myself again, Nate, because now I go, because you got me thinking about Dan Turpin in Superman the Animated Series. I mean, these shows can get dark, so.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah.
Can I just tell you, I as much I love all these Superman-centric episodes in the first season, but you know what probably my favorite episode was? The Legion of Substitute Heroes.
I was just about to ask you about that one. Yep.
Oh, it was so great. I mean, so this is kind of a running thing in the show where they will periodically hold auditions. And in this episode in particular, I mean, they really had fun with kind of these bizarre powers that some of these candidates have. And this group of them that ultimately bands together. And, you know, in the end, they ultimately save the day, right? This D-list baddie, Starfinger, that they're going up against, that seems like he's just like this throwaway villain and not worthy of the rest of the team's time because they're trying to stop these monsters that are eating the ionosphere. But what you find out at the end of the episode is that these little furry creatures that Starfinger is creating, when they leave the atmosphere, they become these monsters. So it all ties together. But some of the folks who are on this team, there's the one who just turns to stone.
It was a classic.
And these bits, and you have this whole montage where they're trying to fill in while the Legion's off world, and you've got these bank robbers, and they run past Stone Boy, and he just turns to stone, and they just run around him. And then probably my favorite was the I forget, Color Kid or whatever his name is, where he can change the color of other things.
Yeah.
And he sees the poster for the missing dog, and then he sees a dog sitting there on the street, so he changes the dog to the color of the one that's missing and returns it. But then this little girl shows up almost immediately to put up a sign for the dog. He changed. Oh, man, it was so great.
But the funniest part is the Porcupine Kid's mum's driving him everywhere. But it almost reminds me of, I can't remember the name of the movie. It had Ben Stiller in it. And he had like his band of superheroes, but they were like the rejects.
Oh, yeah. Mystery Men?
Yeah, Mystery Men. Yeah, that's kind of what it reminded me a little bit. Obviously, a kid's more friendlier version, but I also like she was like, she gave everyone, like, made everyone sick as well. Like, but yeah, it was good.
I don't know if you're a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, but there's a great episode, I think in season 3, called The Zeppo, where it focuses on Xander as like everyone else is doing their thing, and it's just kind of him in the background, but having his own adventure and saving the day in his own way. And like, that's what it kind of reminded me of. But it was genuinely funny. I mean, it wasn't like I said, oh yeah, that's kind of humorous. I mean, it truly made me laugh. So that one was far and away a standout, I think, of that first season.
And I think you need episodes like that because there's obviously it was a standalone episode just in itself, but I think, you know, and we have a lot of fill-in episodes, obviously, with a lot of TV shows these days and all that sort of stuff. But the fact that this actually, like you said, made us laugh and it made us think outside the box as well. I had a lot of fun with this episode as well.
Now, we've been alluding to season 2, so I want to segue into that. A couple of kind of items that I don't want to neglect because I think this is an important piece of the puzzle here. There was a tie-in comic. Did you ever read it?
I didn't even know there was one until I was doing some research and found out about it. So I think I'm going to try and track this down somehow, shape or form.
I think it was called Legion of Superheroes in the 31st Century, and it ran for, I want to say 20 or 30 issues or something like that. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, akin to like the Superman Adventures comic where it's set in the style and continuity of the show. I did quickly check to see if it was on the DC app. I did not come across it. Insert rant about the DC app. I'll leave it at that. But that did exist. And then the other, I think probably the biggest piece of the puzzle here, maybe this accounts for why the show didn't run longer. No toys. There were Happy Meal toys. But other than that, the only thing I saw, and this was from Wikipedia, you maybe came across this as well, that I think there would have been a toy line from Mattel, but there was a lack of retailer interest and they didn't move forward.
Okay.
Which is a bummer because I'm watching the show and I'm like, man, like I would love an action figure of these characters or a little maquette or like something, man.
It's funny. It brings me to My Adventures with Superman. There is nothing. There is nothing about this series. Like they're talking about it a lot now with season 2, and also I think they've talked about season 3. But there's no toys. There's no action figures, which I find funny because in season 2 they have the issue with Abel, I think, with the doll, but no, it's an action figure. I love that how they just threw that in there. But yeah, you're 100% correct. There was no, and that's another reason why no one knows about this series is because there's nothing that we can go and find, even on eBay, other than the DVD. So it's a bit disappointing. Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to mention that, but it is a bummer. And then we have season 2. Now, a bunch of changes for season 2 where, and we've been hitting on some of this already, but we do have this time jump. nebulous period of time. Online I saw it written like 2 years. So I don't know if maybe one of the producers kind of confirmed that at some point, but in story on the show, it's never explicitly said, but at least a couple of years. The characters are all a little bit older, a little bit more grizzled, I suppose. We have a little bit of a darker tone here as well. We do still have standalone episodes, but it follows far more of a season-long arc. And it all starts with Superman X, later to be known as Kal-El, a clone of Superman from the 41st century who journeys to the 31st century to enlist the Legion to help him fight Imperiex in the 41st century, who has decimated the world. And they are ultimately able to stop Imperiex in the 41st century, but he steals the time travel device and goes back to the Legion's time. So they all have to follow, including Kal-El. And Imperiex aligns himself with the Dominators and throughout the course of the season tries to enact his plan to bring the galaxy to its knees. And our Superman does re-enter the picture. At the end of season 1, he returns to his own time. Like you said, you never see him in his time. Like he shows up at the end of season 1, right at the moment when he left, his suitcase is there on the bed and he's going to go down and have chicken and dumplings with Martha. With Jonathan too? What's your take on this? Do you think Pa is dead in this?
I think so. Which is sad because, we just had Superman the Animated Series with Ma and Pa. We've got My Adventures with Superman, obviously many years in the future. But yeah, I honestly take that it is, which is sad because I love Ma and Pa Kent together. And especially in an animated TV show, I think you need that as well. So, but because he doesn't talk about him at all. Not that he spoke much about Ma either. But yeah, I think, unfortunately, he is gone in this series.
I kind of get it's ambiguous. It could go either way, but I do think that's kind of I feel like that's kind of the implication. But in any event, so young Superman returns home at the end of season 1, and then season 2, when they need reinforcements against Imperiex, they bring back Superman, but not the Superman from the moment he returned previously. They bring an older Superman. So now we're not talking young Superman, essentially Superboy. Now we're talking fully fledged Superman. I mean, still, I guess, relatively early in his career, but he is firmly established. He's visibly older. He's more built, more in command. So here's the thing. Well, let me just ask you, the presence of not just one Superman, but 2 of them. We have our Superman and then we have Kal-El, the clone from the 41st century, throughout season 2. Just what was your take on that? Did you feel like that worked? Was that effective? Did you like the 2 Supermen? What was your take?
Overall, I understand why they did what they did. I did like it in some episodes, but I also like the fact that not every episode they were together. There was episodes where, the real Superman was off doing something else, and Superman X or Kal-El was the main character. And predominantly throughout this season, I think Kal-El was actually the predominant Superman. We didn't see the real Superman that much, to be honest with you. We saw him in episode 2, a couple of little interactions throughout, and obviously, the last couple of episodes, that's when we saw him. So, and
the Kandor episode, which we got to talk about.
Oh, definitely. I was watching that one this morning, actually, and yeah, that was one of my favorite episodes, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think in some places it worked well. I like the fact that they used the same voice actor to do both. I would have loved to see more of K3NT. I would have wanted to know more about that side of things. But yeah, like I said, I like the fact that they did try to do something different. We found a new one. I don't know if this version of Superman is in the comics. I'm not sure.
He is not, unless I'm totally missing something, and audience let me know. But to my understanding, no, this is the only incarnation in which Superman X appeared. If I'm not mistaken, he's never called Superman X in the show.
No.
But that's what he's online. He's constantly referred to as that. So I don't know if that was something the fans just picked up, or again, so that was something that the writers threw out there. I don't know.
I'm not sure either. Did you like his costume? Did you like his costume for this series?
Yeah, dude, like the costume was cool. So this capeless costume, and one of the things that we've talked about in all of these Superboy discussions is, all right, if he's Superboy before he's Superman, like in a costume and everything, then you lose that moment of him donning the costume for the first time and becoming Superman. That doesn't mean the story doesn't work, but it's I guess a sacrifice that you make. One of the things that came up in probably our first episode in this series is like, well, what if his Superboy costume is just a little different so that then he still has this change to make. And as I was watching this, the 41st century Superman's costume, I'm saying like something like that, I think could work, where if Superboy had that kind of costume and then he changes and he puts the cape on for the first time, there's something there. So I thought the design was cool.
Yeah, I thought so too. The fact that K3NT actually designed this version of Superman to be immune to kryptonite as well, and you could see it in his eyes, the fact that there was black with green eyes, and other than that, they're exactly the same. Like the two characters drawn side by side are identical except for the hair and the eyes. But yeah, I thought the design of the costume was very well done.
Yeah, so you mentioned K3NT, so that's Kent essentially, right? The robot that cloned Superman to create Superman X to stop Imperiex. You mentioned the vocal performance. So Yuri Lowenthal, he's the one who plays all the versions of Superman. Yeah. And shout out to him because, he plays the young Superman in season 1. And then, of course, the slightly older Superman in season 2. And then the 41st century Superman, who definitely has a harder edge to him.
Yeah.
So not just there, but across the board, the vocal performances, were tremendous. Tara Strong, a regular in these kinds of projects. She had multiple roles. But I guess here's the problem that I had with season 2. We had double the number of Supermen, but it felt like we did not have the level of focus and development for the character that we did in the first season. So I was reading an interview with James Tucker, and he talked about kind of like what led to Kal-El. And essentially the network wanted a quote unquote super up Superman, quote, more of a badass. So it seemed like there was this network interest, shall we say, for, again, a harder-edged, tougher version of Superman. But Tucker talked about how they didn't want to dirty up our Superman, like the Superman. Yeah. So they came up with this clone. And the clone is angrier, right? He grew up in a world decimated by Imperiex. His sole reason for being, he's not, he's kind of like Zod, especially like the movie Man of Steel version of Zod. Like his sole purpose is the preservation of the Kryptonian race. Yeah. Similarly here, Kal-El, his sole reason for being is to try to stop Imperiex. Yeah. So he is angrier, and that comes across. But I don't know. As I'm watching this, I feel like there were a couple of things that kind of where it broke down for me. Number one is that I'm not saying you can't do a Superman and the Legion of Superheroes story, but I do think where this kind of story is most effective is when it is the young Superman, the Superboy, who's learning. I think when you plug in the older Superman here, who's a few years down the road, for me, it like didn't pop the same way because he didn't have much to grow or to accomplish the same way he did in the first season. So I feel like you lose a little bit of something there. And then by having two of them, I agree with you. I think Kal-El gets more of the focus and more of the development, but I don't know. I feel like there's not enough space ultimately for the both of them. And I feel like they should have just picked. Honestly, I feel like even if it had just been Kal-El and we didn't see our Superman, or he just showed up for an episode or something like that.
Yeah.
I think I would have been okay with that. And then you make this Kal-El's journey. I mean, it's not the hill I'm going to die on, but ultimately I think that I get why they did what they did, but I don't know if it served the show well. I mean, how did you feel? How did you feel?
Yeah, I think you have a very good point there with regards to, we saw the Superman development in season 1 and season 2. He's grown up. What I would have loved to have seen when he first came back is like have little stories. What have you been up to? I've taken Dark Side and all that sort of stuff. Just whole little stories of those. But I agree with what you're saying. They should have just spoken about one of them, or just one of those characters, and brought him back for the season finale, like the two-parter. Just bring, obviously with Brainiac 5, and the only person that can get to him we think is Superman. So there's a reason to bring Superman back from the past for that series and for that finale. But I agree with you. I think they should have just brought Kal-El back from the future, just concentrated on him throughout the entirety, and maybe gone back and maybe there could have been a past scene in an episode where we see young Superman and see that sort of thing. That could have been done a lot better.
I don't want to harp on this, but when you look at the range of possibilities of what they could have done, I think that having this combination of an older Superman and the angry clone, that's the combination that doesn't work for me. I think if they brought back the young Superman, Superboy essentially, then you have more of a contrast between Superboy and Kal-El. So I think that could have worked, or just picking one. And if they had picked one, I appreciate James Tucker's position here. I totally get that. Yeah. At the same time, though, I feel like Kal-El should have been more extreme then, right? Like if their whole thing was, well, we have to create a separate character because we don't want to mess with Superman too much. When you look at Kal-El, I mean, yeah, he's angry, but I mean, I don't know. I don't feel like he does anything that you'd be like, oh my God, like I can't believe what Superman's done. So I guess I'm just saying if they were going to have two, I would have wanted more of a contrast, either a more extreme Kal-El and or the younger Superman instead of what we got. I mean, it's fine. And there's some really standout episodes, but I still just feel like that was a little bit of a misstep. And it took me a while as I was watching these. I'm like, what problem am I having with this? Because it's two Superman. I should love this, but it wasn't delivering what the first season was able to with just one, I felt.
And it just goes to show anytime someone tries to put their finger in how they want a show or a movie done, how much it really destroys it.
I know. Now, on a positive note, and multiple, I mean, that's really my only real critique with the show, to be honest, man. Like, I really loved it. And other stuff that I loved about it, Imperiex. So again, I know you're not a huge comics guy, but one of my absolute favorite eras of the Superman comics is the tail end of the Triangle era when writers Jeff Loeb and Joe Kelly took over Superman and Action Comics respectively. And very early on into their tenure, they introduced this idea of Imperiex. And it was a very slow build until we got to this tentpole crossover storyline called Our Worlds at War, which really, I think, marked the climax of their time on the titles, even though they stayed on a little while after that. And Imperiex was the big bad of that and the final boss of their run. And this is the only time the character has ever been done in other media. And for the life of me now, I was trying to, I don't know if I knew that. I think I must have come across this in my research at some point that I knew, but in any event, I was just very pleasantly surprised to see the character getting some play. And they put a different spin on him here, where in the comics, he's the living embodiment of entropy. And he's constantly looking to destroy universes and restart them with the new Big Bang. Whereas here, I mean, it's not a night and day difference, and the design is very much in keeping, but here he's far more of a, kind of like a active agent or player, more of a conqueror than just a universe devourer, right? If that makes sense. And you do get a bit of backstory here where he was born and raised as a slave and gladiator on Apocalypse. Yeah. And then he's fitted with these cybernetic pieces of armor and whatnot and sets out to conquer. So again, a little bit of a different flavor. It's not a one-to-one, translation from the page, but yeah, man, I was just very delighted. I mean, how did you feel about this adversary for season 2?
I really enjoyed it. Like you said, I love the fact that I know season 1 was, you can sort of say the Fatal Five was basically behind the scenes in a lot of those, but not predominantly throughout. Whereas Imperiex is almost in every single episode, and just the fact that we learn who he. I like the fact that they went back to a small origin. Showcased where he's come from. As you just mentioned before, he was a slave, and it's almost a bit of Darth Vaderix, style of how he was created, and the fact that and the background of saving this kid as well. Saving this kid was actually because he's pretty much who created Imperiex. So, and as you spoke about with Kal-El having the badass side of Superman side of things, but then he had to realize that he was designed to kill Imperiex, but to do that you have to kill this child. And he's chosen not to. So he's gone down that path of he's obviously been with the Legion, and his mindset's obviously gone back on I must protect, which is fantastic. But I did love the story arc. I love the fact that Phil Morris voiced the character as well, which I thought was fantastic. The animation of him was perfect too. Like the colors just popped and stood out. And and to me, like it was just like another version of Darkseid to me. Like I said, I hadn't read the comic book side of things, and just seeing what he was and how he, developed. And funnily enough, how he was destroyed at the end, which we'll get to as well. But yeah, I love the story arc with him and how he was used throughout the second season.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Imperiex was kind of like a surprising pull for them to use because again, this was well, now we're into 2007 for season 2, and our Worlds at War was 2001, if my math is right. So, it had been some time, and this wasn't a character that kept coming back in the comics. Like that was kind of it. So I was pleasantly surprised that they, because it's like, yes, we've seen Darkseid, we've seen Mongol. I like that they mixed it up a little bit. And yes, when we get to part 1 of the 2-part series finale and Brainiac 5, who's been corrupted and overtaken by Brainiac 1, kills Imperiex right before what would be the final battle, I was like, man, what a ballsy show. Like we've been spending 12 episodes with Imperiex as the big bad, and now here all of a sudden you're like, no, it's not him, it's Brainiac. Like it was genuinely surprising. So no, that was again, I think very, very effective. Yeah, you mentioned that episode, Unnatural Alliances, where the K3NT robot had also created Terra Man to kill this young child who would eventually create the technology that gives rise to Imperiex. And yeah, Kal-El is really put in a tough spot, but ultimately has to protect this child, counter to what his whole reason for being is. Fascinating stuff. On the Superman side, even though, again, I feel like this was a less effective season for Superman, there were a few things that really I thought were very effective. One was when they're recruiting new members and he puts his support behind Karate Kid, even though Karate Kid doesn't have any powers. Yep. And of course, in that episode, we're dealing with a villain who has a gun that can negate people's abilities, and Karate Kid ultimately saves the day. But I like the faith that Superman placed in him. And then there's that episode where Chameleon Boy shapeshifts and goes undercover as the Persuader to infiltrate Imperix's operation. Unbeknownst to the Legion, Imperiex has essentially utilized the same technique against them as well, because he has a shapeshifter disguised as Superman. But ultimately, Superman's very presence, his essence, seems to have an effect on that shape-shifting villain, and he ultimately helps them in the end. So I don't know, just as a story about like what Superman can mean to people and just what being him for a moment can trigger or awaken in somebody, I thought was interesting.
Yeah, and like you said, I think even the writers and creators of the series probably found it hard, like you said, to bring like the OG Superman into this series, and they've probably found it difficult to how they're going to do that. And like you said, with this episode particularly, like how's he going to work? And we've just seen the goodness from him, and to be honest, I didn't see it coming. I didn't see the fact that Superman was the other, the shapeshifter either. I was actually tricked out by that as well. I thought that was pretty sneaky. But yeah, I liked how that was done. I would have liked to know more about Abel. Would have liked to have known more about that as well. And like you said, it could have come out if season 3 actually happened. But yeah, it was good introduction of Superman in this episode. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about things we wanted more of. Like I said before, I was surprised it was so deep into the series before we got the flashback to how the Legion was formed with that initial trio saving R.J. Brand. R.J. Brand doesn't show up or is even really mentioned. I mean, they mentioned Chameleon Boy's father, but like he's not named until deep into the series. And there's also, I mean, I guess maybe this wouldn't have as much of a place in a Saturday morning kids show, but kind of the political side of this. I mean, there is mention to, I guess, tension with the science police. But they don't go into that kind of political maneuvering with respect to the Legion, the United Planets, the Science Police, with, I guess, as much depth or frequency or specificity as I might have expected. But I don't know. Maybe that's something that season 3 could have gone into, especially as we were getting to like more adult territory anyway. I don't know. But that was one aspect. I'm like, oh yeah, they really, again, tread very lightly on that.
Well, it was more spoken about in season 1. I don't even think we saw the Science Police in season 2, and if it was very minute. It was very small. And yeah, it would have been interesting. I did like the fact that they went back to the origin story of how the Legion was formed, between the trio. So, it kind of, and you go back to the original episode, we see Saturn Girl and Lightning Lad, which is fantastic, but, unfortunately, we don't see Cosmic Boy until later on, which I still love the fact that it's voiced by Will Wheaton, which I thought was pretty ironic, but yeah, it was good to see that, and they did that a lot throughout this series. They went back to origins, like we saw Lightning Lad and his brother met. We saw their origin of how they became who they were, and little bits like that. So it would have been interesting if they would have done that with more characters moving forward, but obviously we didn't get that opportunity.
I know that would have been cool. But like we were saying a moment ago, I think one of the true standout episodes, especially of season 2, was Message in a Bottle, where Imperiex and his forces infiltrate the bottle city of Kandor in the fortress in the 31st century to obtain this device called the Messenger that can essentially terraform the earth and turn it into crystal. And this factors into his plan for domination. And a few things jumped out at me about this. So one is that when the Legionnaires are talking to the Superman robot in the fortress, right before he shrinks them down and they go in, we've seen Superman robots certainly plenty in the comics and animated shows or movies. But this one looked just like Cyborg Superman. He didn't look like the typical Superman robot design, which I very much appreciated. Yeah. And when they were talking about the Messenger, this device, I was like, oh, are they going to, is it like, I thought they might have called it the Eradicator. And then I was like, oh, is it going to look like the Eradicator device? They didn't go that way, but I was like, oh man, we were so close. They were really teasing me with that. But when Superman enters the bottle city, and then, with the Legionnaires following him, this is the Superman from the 21st century talking to the 31st century Kandorians. So they have all this history with Superman that Superman doesn't know yet. And it was heartbreaking / unintentionally hilarious to me when the Kandorians are like, oh, like, you're here, like, are you finally going to fulfill your promise to restore us? And he's like, what are you guys talking about? Because it's one of those things where, he's not particularly effective at what he promises to do for these people. I mean, we go back to the comics. I mean, it takes decades before the city is finally restored, but just kind of that hope that they exuded when they saw him. My heart broke for them.
And especially when Brainiac basically told you failed, and the clash between Brainiac and Superman was pretty prevalent in this episode, which was, but also you saw what happened at the end, how they both, showcased that. But yeah, just the fact that Brainiac basically said you failed, because Superman was upset with Brainiac because you never told me about this and all that sort of stuff. And again, Brainiac's trying to say, look, I'm trying to protect you. I'm trying to let you learn this basically yourself. But yeah, those two actually clashed pretty hard in this episode, which we hadn't seen before. So that was interesting. It was good.
Yeah. And I mean, this really tees up the finale because here you have Brainiac 5 unlocking that Brainiac 1.0 code within his programming. And then armed with this new knowledge, he's able to turn the artificial Kandorian sun from red to yellow. So not only does that charge up Superman, but now you have this entire army of Kandorians. So they're able to beat back Imperiex and then ultimately restore Kandor to full size. And they use the messenger device, well, I'm going to call the Eradicator, to reform the planet Krypton from its remains, which I thought was cool. And then, unfortunately, they mind wipe Superman. Mm. And this is the only instance in the series where this happens. And look, one of my frustrations reading those comics was like, there's this mental implant. So if he learns anything that's too critical to his personal knowledge or just history generally, he'll forget it. And then it gets more involved later on in the comics where they're like outright strapping him to this machine and erasing memories because the implant wasn't sufficient. And I always felt like that's too much. Too much, guys. So here, if it had to happen at all, I mean, at least I guess it makes sense that this would be the case because otherwise when he goes back to his time and he encounters Kandor for the first time, he would approach it differently. So I get it, but I don't know. I just don't love the idea of the mind wipe.
Does that mean these poor people have still got to sit there for another 100 years before?
Yeah. No, I mean, like that's the thing. So, I mean, I get, right. You have to preserve the timeline, but I don't know if it had just been, I don't know. I don't know what the alternative is. If he's just like, he promises that he I don't know. But I would have loved if we could have avoided mind wipes totally, but I understand if that's the instance. But again, teeing up the finale, that's what unlocks that code of Brainiac 1.0. And Brainiac 1.0, you were getting at this earlier, voiced by Corey Burton from Superman the Animated Series. Oh, what a treat that was.
It was, like I said, they had a couple little sprinkles of voice actors that filtered through and voiced different characters. Like you said, Tara Strong was one. But yeah, having Corey Burton back to voice the iconic Brainiac, which I still think is the best version of the character. Yes, I am biased, but I'd love, and it'd be interesting to see because there are, rumors out there that Brainiac's going to be in the new live action James Gunn movie. So it'd be interesting to see how that is portrayed. But yeah, it was really well done. And it was great to see. And yeah, I can't keep the smile off my face when it was on.
I mean, between Superman the Animated Series and I would say for myself, even more so the Krypton television show, the bar's been set very high for Brainiac. But yes, I would love to see him on the big screen done justice. So we'll see, fingers crossed on that front. But yeah, as we get to our 2-part, what ends up being the series finale, Dark Victory, it's all building towards this final clash with Imperiex. But now you have Brainiac 5 being corrupted by this Brainiac 1.0 programming. And like we were saying before, ultimately, initially aligns himself with Imperiex, but then kills Imperiex off screen. You see the tentacles, kind of shooting at him. But it suggests a pretty grisly end for him and a great exchange because Brainiac has been digitizing entire planets and armadas and all of this. And Imperiex says, like, what are you going to digitize me? And Brainiac's like, no, I will simply delete. Yeah. So again, it was quite the twist as we're heading into the finale here. And it was, I thought, a particularly effective climax for this season and the show. I mean, on a number of levels. But with Imperiex off the board, Kal-El's sole reason for being now has been undermined. And there's this moment, we haven't talked about this yet, but Brainiac poisons Superman, our Superman, with kryptonite, places a kryptonite crown on his head. It's like, the lapsed Catholic in me loves this biblical imagery. It's like the crown of thorns. I mean, it's the kryptonite crown. And he's floating in space and he's just ravaged by this kryptonite poisoning and seemingly dies. Yeah. And then you get that great scene with Kal-El where he's like, I can't believe he's gone. And they're like, I know it's terrible about Superman. He's like, no, I mean Imperiex. It was stunning.
It was almost going back to, if you go back to the Terminator, and basically once I've killed John Connor, I've no reason to live. Basically, like my reason for being is gone. And I remember watching that episode and just listening as well, and even I forgot that Superman died in this episode. The OG Superman, and the fact that when that conversation was had, and he basically went, no, Imperiex. And it was, but then obviously, when we learned that he's still, I can still feel that Superman's still alive. And he was getting thrown straight, almost like Spock from Star Trek 3. He's getting thrown straight into obviously he's going into a planet, Superman's going into the sun. But the fact that they grabbed him just in time and, everything happened from there. But it was pretty, I wasn't expecting that at all.
So as pleasantly surprised as I was about Imperiex, again, I had a general awareness he was on the show, but the fact that they did a version of Death of Superman, complete with the coffin with the S symbol on it, I was like, I can't believe, this is a sweet spot for me. Now, I got very excited for a moment, Nate, and then I was disappointed. So I do have another critique here. As the audience knows, it's become a bit of a running bit. I love anytime Superman is thrown into the sun because as we've learned, it's like just cures anything. He's lost his powers. He's poisoned by kryptonite, whatever it is, you throw him in the sun, he'll be fine. Yeah. So he seemingly dies. He's in the coffin. They hurl him into the sun. And I'm saying to myself, yes, this is going to be the thing. He's going to emerge just on fire, all charged up at a crucial moment. And it's going to be this great surprise return. The sun restored. I'm like, yes. But then we find out that Kal-El has this, I don't know, psychic or spiritual connection, and he can tell that Superman is still alive. And they go reach, they need to save him from the sun. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, you don't save him from the sun saves him. God damn it. So that was my only other critique. I was like, oh man, guys, we're so close. Do you not know how this works? The sun fixes it all. But he is ultimately brought back, and then there's this blood transfusion between Kal-El and Superman, and ultimately this leads to I think one of my favorite Superman and Kal-El moments of the show, where they're too physically incapacitated to join the battle out in space with Brainiac and the army and all of that. And Brainiac, by the way, all of these drones that have sort of formed together, as a Power Rangers fan, it was like a Megazord coming together, especially when the Brainiac skull ship becomes the head. I'm like, it's like the Megazord. Like I was having a great time with this. But they can't join the battle, but they have Saturn Girl project their minds into Brainiac's mainframe to try to get through to Brainiac 5. And ultimately are able to, and they do it together, where they ultimately have Saturn Girl merge them, because they're taken down pretty quickly individually by Brainiac. And then they have Saturn Girl merge their forms. And as they come out of the forms that we know, there's a red one and a blue one. Superman red, Superman blue, baby.
Yeah.
And they form this combined version. So I don't know, maybe I will argue against myself. I talked about how I didn't really love the idea of both of them being present and there wasn't really space for them. But then in the end, they literally come together and they are able to get through to Brainiac. Like they're just like Superman's belief in Karate Kid earlier in the season. Like that belief in Brainiac, they're able to get through to him and wake him up. And then he just mops the floor with Brainiac 1. It was a very satisfying conclusion, I thought.
It was, and even when they brought them together, and again going back to the suit, this time it's basically the 41st century suit with a cape, which I thought was fantastic. Like, okay, we've shown how we brought these two together, and like I said, they've gotten through to Brainiac. They've gotten through to Brainiac 5, and Brainiac, like I said, he's basically mopped the floor with Brainiac, which, spoiler alert, even though it was how many years later, like at the very end scene, we actually see, the new version of Brainiac come, which is a sad, from all reports, it was going to be Brainiac 6 and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, but just the fact that at the end, when the new version of Brainy actually was formed and it was more human-like, and it would have been interesting to follow that moving forward, because he said, I've got to leave to find out who I really am and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, it would have been awesome to see what the thought process was moving forward in this series.
Yeah, I mean, apparently just from reading online, the plans for season 3, they were going to bring in Supergirl and Wildfire and other Legionnaires that we hadn't really seen. And it would have dealt with Brainiac 5's quest for redemption, an attack by Brainiac 6, that new version that's formed in the final seconds there. And Tucker also talked about wanting to do an adaptation of the Ghost of Ferrolad, which would have brought in Ferrolad's twin, which could have been interesting. So those were some of the things that were kind of on the docket for the season 3 that we never got to see. I will say that for me, at least, it still felt satisfying. It definitely felt like, man, it would have been cool to see more Legionnaires get spotlights, to see some relationships deepened and whatnot. And then, yes, obviously that big Brainiac tease would have been cool to see where that went. But I still felt like, in terms of each season and then the show overall, I felt like I got a complete story. And so, I mean, it's interesting in terms of who we're speaking to with this episode here. I venture to say there's always a mix, right? There are people listening to this who have watched every episode like us, and hopefully they've enjoyed and hopefully they feel we've done the show justice with this talk. I'm sure there are people who know about it but have never watched it and may or may not, right? And if you're in that camp, I really do recommend it. I mean, it's out on Blu-ray in a complete series set. I don't know offhand how much it's going for currently, but I would say well worth the time and the money to watch it. And then I'm sure there are people listening to this like, oh, there was a Legion show. So I know we're kind of speaking to a bunch of different people here, but again, for my money, it was a satisfying viewing experience.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones that I'll definitely look forward to watching again. How many years down the track, and there's a lot of characters in this series we didn't even delve into that much. Like Timberwolf, I thought was an awesome character throughout this series. We saw his origin story back in episode 2 of season 1. Episode 3. With his dad, and and they brought that into season 2 as well. How we thought that he killed his dad and all that sort of stuff. So, little snippets of that. And you spoke about, which I was on the same thought process of you. It was Mixie's offset, and the fact that they brought him back in season 2 as well. And he had no powers, but he had to pass the trials. And again, with Kal-El, like he was with Kal-El, and Kal-El lost his powers, and just having those two together. So, and there's so much more to delve into the series if you watch if we delved into each and every episode. But yeah, it's a great series, and I recommend it for anyone who's not just a Superman fan, but a DC fan as well. And yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun, and like I said, strongly recommend it.
Yeah, right on. And no, that's the thing. You know, obviously, as a Superman podcast, primarily focus on Superman's role in this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the show it's not a Superman show. I mean, it really is a Legion show, and I think it lives up to that. And you get the spotlight on the other characters, and yeah, like that Zix one when we go back to that magical world. That's when they're going up against Mordru, so classic Legion villain who gets some play there. You know, we have mentioned Lightning Lad. I would say Lightning Lad was probably my favorite, although Bouncing Boy is close. But Lightning Lad gets, I think there's a more consistent presence and through line for Lightning Lad. Bouncing Boy really does, unfortunately, kind of fall by the wayside, I think, in the second season. So that's the thing. There is an ebb and flow to kind of the presence of some of these characters. But I think Lightning Lad is particularly well served over the course of the series. So, and then a lot, you know, like Sun Boy pops up, Star Boy, Matter Eater Lad, Colossal Boy. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot that are present, even if they don't always have a speaking role or much to do. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and especially for Legion, where they've not really been particularly well served in other media. I mean, I know I did quite like that Tomorrowverse animated movie, Legion of Superheroes. And, you know, we've certainly seen various Superman projects. I mean, like the animated series and like Smallville kind of do their spin, and the Arrowverse with Supergirl. So it's not like they've gotten no play, but this is a dedicated show in the 31st century, right? That's the other thing too. A lot of times they're visiting our time, but here is the opposite. And I think being in the animated realm really served them well to be able to, you know, bring all of this to life. So.
But the funniest thing is they're actually in New Metropolis, so they don't talk about anywhere else on the planet. It's just New Metropolis, and that's it. They don't really delve too much about the planet itself. But yeah, I do love the fact, like you said, they concentrate on the Legion. They don't really go into other, like, I would have thought there'd been a lot more time travel throughout this series. They would have gone to different times. But you know, but that's Legends of Tomorrow. That's what they're there for. But yeah, I think what they did for those 2 seasons, especially the story arc of season 2, and stuff like that. You know, we showed Superman growing as a character in season 1 and all that sort of stuff. So very good storytelling there. And yeah, like I said, I think if no one's seen it, definitely go out and grab it. And you're disappointed if you don't actually watch this at least once.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're naturally winding down here, but is there any aspect of this that we have not talked about that you're like, I really want to talk about this? Cause I don't want to, leave anything on the table.
No, I was pretty much, as I mentioned before, with regards to other different characters, we didn't probably delve into a lot because there's so much to talk about when you're delving into a complete series as a whole. Like I said, and I like the fact we brought that up with Timberwolf. You know, the fact that, you know, Chameleon Boy, we saw him at the start of season 2, and we thought he was like a big part of the group, but then we learned he's actually not. Like, you know, he had to actually prove himself later on, especially in that episode with Karate Kid. And all that sort of stuff. But no, I think we've actually spoke about a lot about what the series was, what it was for, where it could have gone. But no, I think we've covered pretty much everything. And yeah, it was great to get to watch it again, and I really enjoyed it. And like I said, just watching the animation, you know, obviously because it's a Blu-ray side of things now, but just the quality of it is just perfect. And you wouldn't think it was, you know, almost 20 years old.
That is a fantastic point. Honestly, I had to remind myself of that as I was watching it. It looks great. Hopefully we've sold some people on it. It's well worth experiencing. I think if you're a Legion fan, if you're a Superman fan, and especially, again, in the context of these episodes we've been doing, if you're a fan of or curious about this idea of a young Superman, aka Superboy, at this point in his journey, this puts, I think, a very worthwhile spin on that story by capturing a Clark Kent who's not yet there and plugging him into this situation where you see him become that hero. It was so much fun to watch. I really do appreciate you rewatching the show, taking the time to do that. And of course, to come on here and have this conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I've been looking forward to this, and I'm sorry it's taken so long to finally do this episode, but this was the time and the place for it. So it all worked out. So, of course, we mentioned Superman, the animated podcast, available on all major podcast platforms and social media channels. Is there anything in particular you want to mention, or anywhere specifically you want to direct people?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me back on the podcast. It's always a great pleasure speaking to yourself, especially someone with your knowledge and understanding of the character and the love for Superman and DC as a whole. It's always a pleasure. I know we've spoken about this a long time ago, and it was just great to finally watch this series again and have a discussion with you, and I had a lot of fun as well. My podcast, Superman the Animated Podcast, it's out there on all your favorite platforms. You can find us on social media at Sup Animated Pod, and also find us on Facebook as well. I've just finished discussing season 1 of My Adventures with Superman. Had so much fun. I had a lot of great people to discuss it with. Looking forward to season 2 when it comes out here in Australia. For those who've listened to the podcast will know that we don't have it here in Australia, which is disappointing. But once I get on to season 2, definitely get stuck into it. But yeah, definitely looking forward to seeing what comes out from the DC space. Especially looking forward to the last Crisis on Infinite Earths movie to see what that's going to be like. I know there's a lot of different takes on that at the moment, like the first 2 movies and stuff like that. But yeah, that's where you can basically find me if you're out there and love to chat to anybody. But yeah.
Right on. Well, I hope everyone will check out your show and follow on social media. So I thank you, Nate. I thank you, audience. Always appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you keep tuning in as our Superboy coverage continues. Until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Be sure to check out our sister podcast series, Another Exciting Episode in the Adventures of Superman, an episode-by-episode breakdown of the classic George Reeves television show, available wherever you get podcasts. Please join us on social media, become a patron, and subscribe, rate, and review today. Links are in the show notes. Thank you all.